Hello, and welcome to a very special episode of Doomed. Normally, playthroughs of Arkham Horror the card game, with a focus on roleplay and storytelling, but today, the focus is uniquely on storytelling. That's right, today, we're going to be reading the introduction to Scenario 2 of the Innsmouth Conspiracy, The Vanishing of Elina Harper. I noticed that the next scenario that I'll be streaming live in our Innsmouth Conspiracy solo playthrough with Silas Marsh, the blessed sexy sailor. I noticed that the introduction to Scenario 2 is quite lengthy, more so than I anticipated. And rather than do that live on stream, I'm going to read it here, post the video, and just give a quick synopsis of it on stream so we can get into the action faster. So if you're watching this and wondering why is this such a short video comparatively, it's just the introduction. You can watch this and then straight into Scenario 2, where you can skip right to the action. So without further ado, let's get into it. Scenario 2, The Vanishing of Elina Harper. Wednesday, August 17th, 1927. 5 weeks earlier. Wake up, damn it! Agent Dawson shakes you awake with his right hand. You're in the passenger seat of a pristine, state-of-the-art motor car, its polished body glowing with light from the moon as it rolls through the foggy Massachusetts countryside. We're almost there, Dawson informs you. Unfortunately, Innsmouth lacks a working railroad, which you would have preferred. Silas, of course, doesn't like cars, or frankly trains either, but he's not going to sail in. There is a bus that runs from Boston to Newburyport, and another that runs from Newburyport to Innsmouth, but Dawson has insisted on driving you there himself, perhaps to provide you an escape route should things go sour, or to show off his expensive automobile. Probably both. As you arrive in Innsmouth, the stale odor of day-old fish and decrepit, musty buildings washes over you. Many of the buildings along the western side of the town seem to be abandoned, though you occasionally spot figures in some of the windows. You imagine Agent Dawson's opulent car must make quite an impression in such a dirty and dingy town. You joke that perhaps he should have driven here in a jalopy. Is that how it's pronounced? Jalopy? To which he replies with a smirk, "That's never been my style. It's never been my style." Eventually, you reach a defunct railroad station that was given up years ago. A few train cars sit abandoned on the tracks, and the depot is boarded up and condemned. Dawson suddenly grimaces and points to another vehicle in the open lot. "That's Agent Harper's Breezer. Let's park here and continue on foot. We can move through the town a little easier that way," he reasons. You check Agent Harper's vehicle before continuing, but it contains no clues as to her whereabouts. From there, you head eastward beside the Manickset. It's a good thing I'm doing this, right? From there, you head eastward beside the Manickset River, passing numerous deserted warehouses, sodden alleyways, and standoffish townfolk. "Harper's got to be somewhere in this forsaken town. Residents don't look all too friendly. Wouldn't be surprised if she drew too much attention from a local mob or the like." Dawson begins to contemplate aloud. You ask how he knows his agent isn't simply keeping a low profile. "Ah, yeah, well, we have a code phrase for that. If she had sent me a letter saying she had some errands to run, that would have signaled that she would be out of touch for a short while. Without that signal, I have to assume the worst." To the northeast, several factory buildings loom over the rest of the town's sagging gambrel roofs, cupolas, and widows' walks. None of the locals stop to greet you along your way. Given the repulsive countenance that many of them bear, their aversion to the usual small-town pleasantries is a relief. Now, quick note here. We haven't been introduced to Innsmouth yet. Silas grew up there, and despite the fact that he is lacking much of his memory from the last sort of 6-8 weeks, things are coming back to him in bits and pieces and flashes. He knows that he is from this town, but his memory of it is almost completely gone. Perhaps things will reveal themselves. One thing he does know, however, is that many of the families in this town have something called the Look. It is, as described here, a repulsive countenance. Many of the townsfolk of Innsmouth look vaguely aquatic in nature, as if they were half fish, half person, but that's ridiculous, isn't it? Eventually, you reach the town square just south of the Manickset, though even these crumbling brick buildings that surround the supposed heart of the town inspire little confidence in Agent Harper's story. An old bus idles nearby, its greasy-looking driver leaning against the door and eyeing you suspiciously. With little else to go on, you decide to split up, knowing that you can cover much more ground that way. Canvass the locals and learn more about this town, Dawson says. Find out who the big shots are in this hellhole. One of them is bound to know where Harper was last seen or who she was with. I'm going to see if I can find where she was hiding out and look for some sign of her. Meet up with me here at 1900 hours. Understood? You nod in agreement and go your separate ways. I find it interesting as well. Silas Marsh he's a sailor by trade. He's probably earned a bit of a name for himself by being strong, perhaps lucky, someone who can be counted on in an emergency. But how did Thomas Dawson get a hold of him? That's my question. And does he think that it's useful to bring someone with local connections? Because certainly an investigator, Silas is not. The first person you check with is the bus driver, who probably has a decent understanding of the town. Here it is. His coarse grayish skin is the first thing you notice, followed swiftly by unusually deep and shadowed creases in the flesh of his neck, almost as if he were prematurely aged. His bulging eyes are unsettling, and you're suddenly unsure whether you've seen him blink even once as you approach. You start to offer your hand as you introduce yourself, then you think better of it, just in case the man has some kind of disease that you've never heard of. He introduces himself as Joe Sargent and gives you a useful, if cursory, rundown of some of the nearby buildings. What follows is a summary of the information conveyed to the investigators, Silas Marsh, about the town of Innsmouth. So, in plain view of the town square is a grocery of the First National chain, run by a youngster by the name of Brian Burnham, an outsider from Arkham. The idea that somebody else from Arkham might be here fills you with some degree of hope and perhaps a little bit of pity for the boy. The Gilman House, owned by Avera Gilman, is the only hotel in town. Considering its shabby appearance, you suddenly wish you'd only planned a day trip. Down the street from the Gilman House, tucked between a dismal restaurant and a drugstore, is the Little Bookshop, so named not for its size, but after its owner, Joyce Little. Mr. Sargent doesn't seem to care much for her. To the north, along the Monuxet, is the Marsh Refining Company, the centerpiece of the town's only industry. Joe speaks of its owner, Barnabas, whom he calls Old Man Marsh, with a measure of reverence and admiration. Right away, I'm going to jump in here and mention the Marsh family is obviously an important one here in Innsmouth. Although the question that immediately comes to my mind is Silas related to this Old Man Marsh, Barnabas, or is he sort of from another branch of the family altogether? Continuing on, Mr. Sargent tells you to avoid the old bridge along Fish Street, which has collapsed from years of disrepair and now serves only as a haunt for the dispossessed. And don't listen to that drunk Zadok, the bus driver warns. His tales are just that. Tales, nothing more. Further east, past Water Street, lies Innsmouth Harbor. Sargent warns you not to get in the way of the dock workers or their business, for they are a rowdy bunch who aren't used to outsiders, especially the ironically named Robert Friendly, whose name Sargent utters with a hint of hostility. To the north, on New Church Green, there exists an old Masonic hall, now given over to an organization referred to as the Esoteric Order of Dagon. What truly goes on inside this old, decrepit building is anyone's guess. Finally, Mr. Sargent asks you what you're doing in Innsmouth. You dodge the question with one of your own, asking him if he's seen anybody around town matching Agent Harper's description. He pauses, then shakes his head. Never seen her, he mutters, refusing to meet your gaze. You spend the rest of the day learning the layout of the town and attempting in vain to make conversation with the locals. The more time you spend in this strange, squalid town, the more you wish you had never taken Agent Dawson up on his offer. There's something foul in the air here, something rotten and fetid that disturbs you to your core. Later that night, you meet up with Agent Dawson in the now deserted town square and share what you've learned. Take a look at this, he says, handing you a creased, ink-stained letter addressed to him. Turns out Agent Harper had a room in that disgusting old hotel. Still does, technically, but seems like she hadn't been around for a few days. I broke in, and I found this among her things. Judging from the unmailed letter, it seems Agent Harper knew someone in town was tracking her movements. I'm being followed, the missive explains. Don't know how they know, but they know. It's like the whole town is in on something. I have no contacts here whom I trust. It's going to require more than one agent to sort this out, I fear. The letter is cut short. Well, she has one more agent now, Dawson says bitterly once you're done reading. There's only one reason she wouldn't have sent this letter. Harper's in danger, and somebody in this balled-up town knows where she is. Together, you begin to formulate a plan to find Agent Harper. First, narrow down her last known location. Second, find out who knew she was in town. Then, pay them a visit. Agent Dawson has briefed you on your task and prepared you for this mission. Each investigator may now spend the experience recorded under unspent experience in the campaign log, which I believe is, not there, 5. So I've sort of pre-spent that, knowing that there'd be a point at which I'd get to spend it. And that brings us to the setup for Scenario 2, The Vanishing of Elina Harper. I won't look at this whole thing right now, but this is the town layout of Innsmouth as noted in the in that introduction. Silas will be going around trying to figure out where Ms. Agent Harper was last seen and who last saw her. It's a very exciting time. I hope you can join me on the stream for this. That was the introduction to The Vanishing of Elina Harper. Looking forward to it very much. Join me on twitch.tv/biffthebaus, that's BIFFTHEBAWSS. If you haven't already, of course, you can watch me play Doomed live with a focus on roleplay and storytelling, and interact with the chat if you're there. Thanks very much, everybody. We'll see ya on Doomed.